Hello and welcome back. So this week I'm going to talk about the great debate of whether you should rent or buy, especially in this market, but just in general. Also, the consensus I get, and which makes sense, is that most people, they want a place to call their own. They don't want to get evicted by an investor or a speculator that all of a sudden wants to sell the house and make money, or kick them out because they want to rent it to somebody else, rent evictions and whatever else. And the reason most people would want to rent is because they don't want to be tied down. But I don't hear a lot about the second part of that, being tied down and wanting to rent. Most people, of course, in my business that I come across, they ultimately want to buy. But again, given this market condition right now, is it worthwhile, and how far off are these numbers? So I'm going to take the emotion out of it, and we're going to talk just strictly numbers here, and we're going to analyze it a few different ways to kind of get a good bearing on what you think and what I think, and let the numbers speak for themselves. So let's start off with this Investopedia article here. Link is in the description, and this is the price to rent ratio, determining if it's better to buy or rent. And this is something that I've never talked about on this channel before, but someone alerted me to this on Twitter or X, I think, one day. This was a few months ago, and they said, you should look into this and do a video on this. But it is very important, so I'll be using this, and I'm also going to be using some real-life scenarios comparing actual homes when what would happen if you purchase them and rent them, and what's the cost difference. So let's just read some quick highlights from this, because this is pretty interesting stuff. What is the price to rent ratio? The price to rent ratio is the ratio of home prices to annualized rent in a given location. This ratio is used as a benchmark for estimating whether it's cheaper to rent or own property. The price to rent ratio is used as an indicator for whether housing markets are fairly valued or in a bubble. Well, I'm pretty sure you can guess what our housing market is, but we're going to let the numbers speak for themselves here. And here's the formula and calculation of price to rent ratio. It is calculated by dividing the median home price by the median yearly rent, and the formula for the price to rent ratio as follows. Price to rent ratio, median home price divided by median annual rent. Pretty simple stuff here. You can actually do this with any home, which I will also show you now or in a few minutes, that I have picked some homes from realtor.ca, and I'm going to show you the price to rent ratio on those and the affordability. So we're going to look at both sides of this equation here. What the price to rent ratio can tell you. The price to rent ratio is used as an indicator for whether housing markets are fairly valued or in a bubble. The dramatic increase in the ratio leading up to the 2008-2009 housing market crash was, in hindsight, a red flag for the housing bubble. Now, I don't know what that ratio was. I clicked the link, but it didn't tell me. But I'd really like to know what that price to rent ratio was. I'm sure I could figure it out online. Trulia produces a price to rent ratio called the Trulia Rent versus Buy Index, which compares the total cost of home ownership with the total cost of renting a similar property. And of course, the total cost of home ownership factors in mortgage, principal and interest, property taxes, insurance, closing costs, homeowners association fees, mortgage insurance, and tax advantages such as mortgage interest deduction, which we don't have in Canada, but in the States they do. That's a pretty nice program or tax break they have there. So here's the meat and potatoes of this price to rent ratio. Trulia established thresholds for the ratios as follows. A price to rent ratio of 1 to 15 indicates it's much better to buy than to rent. A price to rent ratio of 16 to 20 indicates it's typically better to rent than buy. And a price rent to rent ratio of 21 or more indicates it is much better to rent than buy. And here's a quick example. Again, US stuff here. As of the second quarter of 2020, the median home value was $291,300. The median home rent was $1,463 for August 2020. The price to rent ratio thus was 16.6. $291,300 divided by 12 months of $1,463 rent. This is across the US, but the price to rent ratio can also be calculated based on figures for a specific city. Okay, now let's look at some actual homes from realtor.ca. These are not my listings. I'm not promoting these listings. Yeah, you get in big trouble as a realtor when you're advertising other people's listings, but I'm not doing that here. I'm just using these as references here. So here was one in Niagara Falls here, $2,500 a month for a 3-bedroom, 3-bath townhouse. And I also have one for sale down here for $709,999. So I'm going to use these actual asking prices, whether it's for rent or for sale, to compare these homes. I'm not going to suggest you can get these homes for less, even though you probably can. Now, for the mortgage and payment calculation for owning the home, I did use the built-in calculator right here on realtor.ca, which is actually very good. I've gone through a few different calculators on the computer here. I use one on my app on my phone, which is not this, but on a desktop or a browser, this one's pretty good, and it breaks it down 10%, 15%, or 6.48%. And I'm going to do these all the same, except for the more expensive one, which I had to go with 20% down. But we're going to use the 10% down calculation here at the rate of 4.5%. And of course, it's going to be a monthly payment because we're comparing monthly rent to this. And I will say everyone's a first-time buyer here. In the monthly expenses, I'm going to leave blank because you're going to be paying utilities whether you're renting or you're owning. And I just put a little bit extra insurance because when you own a house, insurance is more expensive than if you have tenants or renters insurance. So, but the rest of the stuff is blank except for property taxes, obviously, because you have to pay that when you're owning a home. And there's a difference between condo, and I have included the condo fees when I'm comparing condos to rent to own also. Now you can see we have a total monthly payment of $4,071, and that also requires an $81,000 or $82,000 cash needed to close. And I don't know if that breaks down the down payment or whatnot. $71,000 down payment, so you had added some closing costs in there also. So $70,000 to $80,000, and you have a $4,000 a month payment. And you can rent this house there for $25.50 a month. But I'm going to break all these properties down. Some of them actually were taken off the market on here, so I don't have both of them, but I have them on my other slideshow here. Okay, now let's get into preparing the specifics of these properties. I got to slap myself in the middle of the screen here because I need to see what I'm reading here. So there's that first townhouse, and this is in Niagara Falls, asking $25.50 a month. So of course your rent's going to be $25.50 plus utilities. Now to buy that same house, it was $710, just under $710, and of course using the realtor.ca calculator with 10% down, $4,071 a month. Plus utilities and maintenance, plus that $70,000 to $80,000 in closing costs and down payment and whatnot. So of course, it is a lot cheaper to rent that house than own it right now. And I don't see any upside in prices, of course, with my forecast. So it's very risky actually to own that home. It's not that it's even more expensive, but in my opinion, it's risky. Now, of course, this not just goes for this home, but all homes out there. I don't want to be bad-mouthing just one listing here. And that has a price to rent ratio of 23%. So anything over 20 or 21% is, it's better. You're way better off renting than buying. So this is clearly not a good choice if you were to choose to buy this house when you can rent the same one or right on the same street a few doors down for a lot less money. Moving on to the next one there on Winston in Grimsby. And I think this place must have just rented because it was on my realtor.ca feed and now it's gone. So $23.50 a month. And it is, let me just move myself here, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 715 square feet. And sorry, that was $23.50. I have $25.50 there, but it's $23.50 a month. And same unit, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 715 square feet. You can buy for $599.9. It's $3,800 a month. There, I have the right price there on my thing. So $23.50 to rent, $3,809 plus utilities and maintenance to own that house. That does include the condo fees in that $3,809. So significantly more, and that's got a ratio of 21%. So the ratio tells you you're better off to rent that unit than buy it 100%. Here's a nice big house, 4-bedroom, 4-bath in Oakville, $5,450 a month plus utilities. It's a lot of money for a house, but it's a big house, in Oakville, great area. And I don't have the exact same house here, but I have one in the same neighborhood. Also, 4-bedroom, 5-bathroom. You're getting on this one, and it's just under 2.2 million. Maybe it's worth less, maybe it's worth more. I don't know. I'm not in that market. I haven't done an evaluation on this house. But to buy it with 20% down now, you can't do 10% down on this house because you're not going to get an insured mortgage. So 20% down you need on this house. You're talking, big money down, like $400,000 or $500,000 to close this deal, and it's $10,402 to own that house every month, or for $5,450 you can rent it. It's almost double the price here, and the ratio 34%. So it's like extremely not wise to buy this home. rent it, and wait for the market to become more reasonable. Last one here on the list is King Street West in Toronto, $3,200 a month. Let's see what this one was. This was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 800 to 900 square foot apartment condo. Rent it for $3,200 a month plus utilities, and you can buy that home for $850. Again, I don't know if this is overpriced, underpriced. I'm not familiar. I haven't done my research in this area, but this is a same unit, or not the same unit, but similar unit, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, same square footage. $850. You can buy that home, and so $3,200 to rent it, $53.49 a month to own it, and plus utilities and maintenance, right? Of course, both of them have utilities, but you have the maintenance or whatever on top of that. And let's see the ratio here. The ratio is 22%. So more advisable to rent that than buy it, according to this ratio. So as you can see so far, you're much better off renting a place than buying a place for the time being. I'm not talking for the rest of your life, but for the time being. Now, I do have some more charts I'm going to show you that I spent hours, literally hours making these charts. There was I don't know, maybe I was getting distracted and people kept calling me, but I spent a lot of time making these next charts. But before I get into those, I want to tell you just about a story on the weekend where I was showing actually some subscribers here. You know who you are. I won't name your names, obviously, but showing them some places in Niagara. I showed them 5 places. Every one of them was empty. 4 of them, or 3 of them were brand new. The one was only a year or so old. The other one was a little bit older. But of course, they could choose whatever one they wanted. There was lots of selection here because we have lots of listings, which will be my next chart. But I wasn't even home yet. Now, you guys don't even know this if you're watching, but I wasn't even home. And like one of the agents like calling me desperate, like, how did it go? When do they want to move in? Are they waiting? Like, or how's their credit? Like, they're asking me all these questions, and I'm just like, well, they're making their mind up, but yours is not top of the list. And she said, are they looking for December 1st? I said, no. And she's like, desperate. Like, if they're looking for December 1st, we can work a deal. Like, again, didn't even make it in the door to my house after these showings. And one of the agents, again, like, seemed pretty desperate when she called me. And this is why that agent would have seemed desperate. So on the left here, we have the last 10 years. This is yearly data of new listings for sale on the Toronto Real Estate Board. So there's a lot of data, a lot of homes, like over 3 million listings. And you can see, actually, we're not doing too bad for new listings here. Of course, our population's increased a lot, but this is not just the GTA. This is all over. All the boards that are part of TREB are on their system right now. So it's mainly GTA, but there are some outside areas like my area and London, Ontario and whatnot. So yeah, you can see like it's very similar to the last few years. Nothing big, a little bit more obviously than 10 years ago, but nothing like, no big trend. It's not a big significant trend. Then on the right here, new listings for rent. And again, I've talked about this many times on this channel, but you see 60,000 back in 2014, and now we're up to 160,000 in 2024. The year's not even over. It's actually over 160,000 right now, but the year's not even over. So you have all this inventory to choose from as a tenant, and when you're buying, you don't have as much selection as you do renting. So why would you, again, be incentivized to go compete for listings that are still pricey and there's competition on them a lot of the times, and especially in GTA, and the prices really haven't subsided yet because we haven't got into that recessionary environment. But you can clearly see the number of rentals is ever increasing. So you're going to have that supply and demand dynamics as a tenant, and it's going to be in your favor. It's trending more in your favor now, and we're seeing that with rent prices flattening out and in declining in some areas. Now, some people have commented that I don't see them declining yet. Well, they're not big declines, but the main thing is they've stopped increasing because of the amount of supply out there. All right, so I've done this price to rent ratio in some of the major regions in Canada here. Now I have to use the average price and the average rent because I don't have access to their boards, and I'm sure they do have median data, but this is why, and I wrote at the bottom here using average sale price. But this is just generalization here. I have the next slide in Ontario there for specific areas, but you can see Victoria, 34. And what does it say? Much better to rent than buy. Greater Vancouver area, 35. Like, these are sky high. These are places like San Francisco and stuff that they've talked about in articles that I've read that were this high. So huge bubbles, right? The higher the number, the bigger the bubble, obviously. This is not just about being better to rent or buy. This is also about how big the bubble is. And yeah, so Edmonton even, which I was surprised. I thought Edmonton would be in the orange zone where it's, typically better to rent depending on your circumstance, where you can see in Saskatchewan or Regina, Saskatchewan, I should say. Calgary, of course, 26, much better to rent than buy. So all the red places here are obviously much better to rent than to buy right now, given the current market conditions and prices. And then you do have Regina and Winnipeg. And we see a theme. The further you get away from these major populated places, the more desirable it is to buy. It's not desirable yet, but the more desirable it is. So Edmonton, of course, it's a little bit lower, that ratio, than Calgary, because Calgary is more desirable, more populated for most people anyway, I should say, more desirable. Then you have Ottawa. Ottawa's at 26, same as Calgary. You're better off renting there. All the politicians and stuff are buying up the houses because they keep increasing the government. So maybe that's why. But I'm sure there's a lot of bureaucrats up in Ottawa. Montreal, same thing. Montreal was doing well for an affordability factor, but it seems to hit its peak this year, and it's not worth buying there. You're better off to rent in Montreal. And even Halifax, 21. So you're better off to rent right now in Halifax. So right across the country, there's not one place that I've found in these major areas that you're better off buying than renting. Now I want to break it down into the GTA here. Let me just move myself out of the way. Okay, so we do have a beacon of light here. We have London, Ontario, and it's for condos, you see on the right here. Condo has got the black circle around the outside, and freehold doesn't. So I did break these down into freehold and condos because I wanted to see the difference here. If you're in London, one of the few places in Ontario that you can actually buy a house, and it is just a little bit, it's barely, but it is a little bit more attractive, much better to buy than rent in a condo. Not the case for freehold, though. Freehold is at the upper end of typically better to rent. And then everywhere else, it's the same story as the rest of Canada. And looking here at St. Catharines, Niagara region area, you see it's 22 for freehold, much better to rent, and 19 for condos, typically better to rent. And as you get closer to Toronto and to the major, Toronto and York region and stuff, the numbers go up. Of course, the further you are away from the major populated areas, the cheaper it is, right? So Kitchener, 23. So they're all, I can go through the numbers, but it doesn't matter. But as you get into Toronto, it's 33 for freehold and 20. So 20 is at the high end. It's pretty much, they should be both red there, but I'm not going to, of course, make my own rules with this. It's 20 is the top end of typically better to rent, depending on your situation. But yeah, they're all in that same range here. So now I did a little historical chart on this to see, okay, how long has it been like this? And I can go back 10 years with the data I can get on the system. And freehold and condo, again, broke it down by type. And look, like freehold was typically better to rent, but depends on situation. That was the best in 2014, if I move my head here, 2014. That was the best case scenario. And of course, it went up and then it went down, and we're going to get into that in a second. I know why it went back down, and I know why it went back up again in 2020. Condos, yeah, they've been, kind of 2019 or so. It's been borderline, but after that, all the speculation, all the pre-construction sales, everybody's an investor, speculator. Of course, it hasn't been better to buy. It's been better to rent a condo, and now we're borderline. Typically better to rent. So it doesn't mean that it's better to buy. It's typically better. So we're making some progress. These ratios are coming down, but that freehold one is still way out of whack. It's like 28 or something. Now, I do want to talk about those peaks on the blue line, right? So we have that peak here. Why did it change? Well, this is very simple. I say this all the time. This is what moves the world and creates inflation, reduces inflation, all the rest of it. It is interest rates. So this is when June 2017 is when the Bank of Canada started to raise interest rates. They started raising interest rates back then. And they went from like 0.5 to 1.75 and in whatever amount of time it was. And they held them there until COVID starts at, I think it was 1.75% for the Bank of Canada overnight lending rate. And yeah, look what happened. Right when they started raising, that ratio started coming down for the freehold. Then in March 2020, right there, the second arrow in the middle, they dropped it. COVID started. They dropped it right to zero. And look at that. It became less attractive to buy, better to rent, right? Like, why are you going to spend all this money on these overpriced homes? March 2022, when they started instantly, this is so funny, it's like instant, when they started to raise the Bank of Canada rate in 2022, after their ZERP, or their zero interest rate periods, look what happens, or policy, I should say. Look what happens. That ratio starts to come down, and it's still coming down, which is a good sign. How low will it go? I don't know. It's freehold in the GTA. This is just the GTA, mind you. Freehold's pretty desirable, but it is coming down. Maybe it'll get to 20, who knows, but it's heading in the right direction. You're getting closer and closer to being in that where it's typically better to rent, but it depends on your situation. But it's been a long time for freehold since it's been much better off, or someone has been much better off to buy than rent. And who knows if we will see that anytime soon or at all. It would have to be a pretty big crash, even coming from me. But maybe 40, 50%, and you'll be able to buy, and it'll be better to buy. But I guess we'll have to see. So hopefully you've learned a little something. I learned a little something from looking into this ratio here, this price to rent ratio. And anytime I look at a house or someone asks me that question, I think I'm just going to refer them or try to work this calculation for them and just say, look, this is the way I look at it. Whether it's a combination of the monthly payments, so you have the affordability of, say, well, it's $3,000 to buy the house, or $2,000 to rent the house or condo or whatever it is. And the ratio says, so there's a couple of different things here that are confirming that unless there's you have a specific situation that favors you, when you're in that in-between mode, look at these ratios and get your emotions out of it. And I know it's hard to, like, we just want a house, we want this is all we've ever wanted. That will come after or over time, right? We're not talking this is for the rest of your life, but and of course you have to deal with those bad faith evictions and owners selling homes, and it's annoying. 100%, I agree with anyone that it is annoying. But again, if you can, strategically look at these numbers and make your move when the time comes, which it is coming, renting isn't so bad just because of the savings you're going to have in it right now. And remember, those people that have speculated, they're the ones paying those $4,000 payments a month plus when you're paying $2,500 to rent their house. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, I'll see you next time.